was 2016 when I took the night nurse job at the county jail. I needed the money. My mom was sick, bills were piling up, and this job paid more than any hospital shift I could find. I told myself I could handle it. Just meds and checkups, right? But the moment I stepped inside, I knew this place wasn't a normal place. The jail was old. It was built in the 1950s, and it felt like it hadn't changed much since then. Cinder block walls lined with peeling paint, flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead like angry insects, and a heavy silence that pressed down on you the deeper you walked in. It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but rather was watching. My shifts ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. At night, most inmates slept. The halls were dim, lit just enough to guide your steps, but never enough to feel safe. The security cameras covered every angle, or so they claimed. But even those feeds had a way of glitching, usually when you needed them the most. And they did. Often. The medical unit was tucked away in a quiet corner of the jail. Just a few old cots, a locked supply closet, and a wooden desk that creaked every time you touched it. One small barred window looked out into the hallway, but the glass was so old and foggy, you could only see blurred shadows moving past. Most nights were uneventful. I'd chart vitals, prep medications, maybe deal with the occasional migraine or stomach bug from the general population. It was lonely, sure, but quiet, until the third week. That's when things changed. It started with the lights. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the lights in the med unit would flicker. Just once. Not a full blackout, but more like a quick pulse. Like the building shivered for half a second. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. The place was old after all, and probably just faulty wiring or some outdated circuit breaker. No big deal, I thought to myself. But curiosity got the better of me. The next morning I checked the maintenance logs and nightly reports. Strangely, there was never any mention of it. Nothing from the day shift, no outages, no system errors. It only seemed to happen during the night, during my shift. So I brought it up to the corrections officer on duty, a guy named Hendricks. Gruff, middle-aged, built like a fridge, with that tired look people get when they've seen too much and said too little. He'd been working at the jail for over a decade. When I mentioned the 313 flicker, he froze mid-sip of his coffee. "You noticed that, huh?" he said, not looking at me. "Yeah. What is it?" He let out a long breath. "Probably just old wiring. Just don't go poking around during that time." And that was it. He turned back to the monitors without another word. It wasn't what he said that got to me, but how he said it. Like saying more might invite something in. That answer only made me more curious and uneasy. I started keeping a journal. Every night at exactly 3:13, the same flicker happened. Once, just for a second. But it was always followed by something strange and something subtle. A door would creak open down the hall, even though it had been closed tight. A security camera would freeze. Or I'd hear whispers that are not voices exactly, but more like breaths forming words, just out of reach. And then came cell 23. One night, around 2:40 a.m., I was called to check on an inmate having chest pains. Cell 23. It was in the older wing and was rarely used, except when the newer cells were full. The hallway to that wing was colder than the rest of the jail. Not just chilly, but breath-visible cold. I remember that well, because I could see my own breath in front of me, like I had stepped into a freezer. The inmate, a man in his 50s named Willis, was hunched on his cot, clutching his chest. But as I got closer, he looked up at me, and something about his face stopped my cold. He wasn't scared. He was terrified. "They said you'd come," he whispered. "What? Who?" I asked. He looked past me, into the hallway. "They live in the walls. They talk when the lights flicker. They told me you're next." Before I could respond, the lights flickered. 3:13 a.m., the exact second. And behind me, from the dark hall, I heard it, bare feet on the tile. I turned around immediately, but the hallway was empty. When I turned back, Willis had curled into a ball, rocking. "They're always watching," he muttered. "Always watching." I called Hendricks to escort me out of that wing. When he arrived, he didn't say a word, just looked at me with a tired kind of pity. We didn't go back to cell 23 again for over a week, and for Willis, he was transferred supposedly for mental health reasons. But the next night, it got worse. I was alone in the med unit, reviewing charts. The door was closed, lights buzzing softly above me. Then, the flicker came again, at 3:13 a.m. I looked up. There was someone standing behind the frosted window. A silhouette, perfectly still. Tall, too tall. I stood up with my heart racing and opened the door. No one was there. The hallway was dead silent. I walked out, checked both ends. Nothing. But when I turned to go back into the med unit, something caught my eye. The reflection in the glass. There was still a silhouette in the window, but it wasn't me. It stood there behind me and was watching. I spun around immediately but found nothing or no one. That night I didn't sleep when I got home. I called my supervisor, asked if anyone had reported anything strange in the old wing. She sighed. "You should talk to Barnes," she said. "He used to do your shift." I called Barnes later that evening. His voice was quiet and nervous. "Listen," he said. "Whatever you're seeing, don't let it get too close." "What do you mean?" "I made the mistake of opening that door once. The one at the end of the old hall. The one they keep locked." "There's a door?" "Yes," he said. "It used to lead to the old isolation chamber. It was sealed off years ago after a suicide. Inmate hung himself with a bedsheet. They said he scratched symbols into the walls with his own blood." My skin went cold. I heard whispers every night after that. I started seeing them in the mirrors, in the windows. Eventually I quit. Couldn't take it anymore. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I did something stupid. I went to the door. The one at the end of the old hall, past cell 23. It was rusted and sealed, but not locked. Just latched. I opened it. The air inside smelled like rot and mildew. The walls were covered in dark stains, while some faded, some recent looking. There were markings too. Carvings, spirals, eyes, scratches in long looping patterns. And in the center of the room, an old metal cot. I stepped closer, and my flashlight died. Not flickered. Died. Total blackness. And then I heard it. A whisper. So close, it could have been inside my own ear. "We've been waiting." I ran. I slammed the door shut and never opened it again. 2 days later, I handed in my resignation. No explanation. Just a short letter and a deep, unshakable need to never step foot in that place again. I couldn't sleep nor eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing in the mirror. Not just its face, but the way it knew me. Like it had been waiting. Hendricks didn't try to stop me. He just gave a slow nod like he understood. It started like any other night shift. I worked as a security at a small, quiet office building. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect anything creepy to happen, just a few floors, empty hallways, and a handful of overnight employees. My job was simple. Patrol the floors, check the cameras, and make sure everything was locked up. I had done this 100 times before, but that night, something was different. It started around 2:30 a.m. I was making my usual rounds, the steady rhythm of my footsteps, the only sound in the empty corridors. The building always felt colder at night, the air still and unmoving. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, casting their sterile glow on the walls. Everything was normal, until I heard a voice, coming from the end of the hallway. I stopped mid-step, my breath catching in my throat. At first, I thought I imagined it. The sound was so faint, barely more than a whisper. But as I stood there, straining to listen, I heard it again. It wasn't the hum of the air conditioning. It wasn't the creak of the old pipes. It was words. But they were wrong. The voice was stretched, drawn out, the words blending together in a slow, slurred murmur. It was like hearing someone talk underwater, their speech distorted and warped in a way that made my skin crawl. A chill ran down my spine. Someone was talking, but there wasn't supposed to be anyone here. I turned my head toward the sound, my pulse quickening. The voice was coming from the supply closet. I swallowed hard. That door was supposed to be locked. Slowly, I stepped forward, my fingers tightening around the flashlight at my side. The closer I got, the stranger the voice became. The words weren't making sense. It was just a jumble of syllables, whispered too fast and too slow at the same time, like a recording being played at the wrong speed. My stomach twisted. Someone was inside. Or something. I stopped just outside the door, my hand hovering inches from the doorknob. The metal looked dull under the fluorescent light. A thin layer of dust settled around its base. It hadn't been touched in a while, and yet, the voice was coming from behind it. Then, silence filled the hallway. The whispering stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie stillness in its place. A deep, unsettling quiet settled over everything, making my skin prickle with unease. The air felt heavier, pressing down on my chest, like an unseen force. The building had always been quiet at night, but this was different. This wasn't just silence. Then suddenly, a thump echoed from inside the closet. Something had hit the door. I stumbled back, a sharp breath escaping my lips as my heart began to race. I fumbled for my radio with shaking fingers, my heart pounding against my ribs. Again. Louder this time. It wasn't a normal knock. It wasn't cautious or hesitant. It was forceful. Desperate. Like something wanted out. I turned on my heel and hurried back to the security office, locking the door behind me with trembling hands. I barely had time to catch my breath before I was at the desk, pulling up the security cameras. My fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, bringing up the live feed from the hallway. The supply closet door filled the screen. It was closed. The hallway was empty. I exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of my neck. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Then, suddenly the screen flickered. For less than a second, the feed cuts to black. When it came back, the closet door was wide open, and the hallway was still empty. My stomach twisted into knots. I rewound the footage, frame by frame, my eyes scanning every detail. The door hadn't opened normally. It hadn't creaked or swung outward like it should have. It had snapped open, instantly, like something had forced it from the inside. My skin crawled. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a trick of the light. Something was in that closet, and now it was out. Then, at 3:13 a.m., another alert came through. Motion detected. The camera feed switched to the stairwell. I leaned in, watching closely. The stairwell was empty. The motion detector must have glitched. But then, just as I was about to turn away, a shadow moved. It didn't walk, but appeared. 1 second, the stairwell was empty. The next thing, a tall, dark figure was standing on the bottom step. No features, no face, just a shape, darker than the shadows around it. I blinked, my skin crawling. but before I could react, the feed was cut out. Every single camera went black. A sharp knock hit my door. Not from the hallway, but from inside the security office, right behind me. I turned, but the room was empty. The only door was the one I had locked myself. But when I looked back at the monitors, one camera was still working, the one in the hallway outside the security office. And on the screen I saw it, a figure, standing just outside my door, not moving, not knocking anymore, just waiting. I couldn't breathe. The door handle turned. I grabbed my flashlight, gripping it so tight my knuckles turned white. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen. The handle rattled again, and then a whisper, right against the door. "Come out." I squeezed my eyes shut. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Maybe minutes, maybe hours, but eventually the handle stopped moving. When I looked at the monitor again, the figure was gone. The hallway was empty. I wanted to believe it was over, that whatever it was had left, but the air felt wrong and heavy, like it was still there, somewhere watching me. Then, without warning, my radio crackled to life. A low, static-filled whisper seeped through the speaker, distorted and stretched, almost inhuman. My hands trembled as a cold shiver ran down my spine. I dropped the radio immediately. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Turn around." I couldn't. I wouldn't. The room had turned ice. My breath was visible in the dim light. Slowly, I looked at the monitors. Every camera was back online. Every hallway. Every stairwell. All clear. Except one, the security office. The feed showed my own room where I sat, frozen. And standing behind me was a figure. It was tall, black, and featureless. So close it could reach out and touch me. I bolted the office door, but was yanked open before I even reached it, like something had thrown it wide. I ran. Every door I passed, once locked, stood open now, like something was letting me go, or letting something else out. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hand shook as I fumbled the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and then a fresh handprint on my window, pressed against the glass, but the lot was empty. I floored it, speeding away without looking back. By morning, I had quit. No explanation, no excuses. Just walked away. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still hear that whisper, "Come out," and I wonder, what would have happened if I had? I used to work the night shift as a deputy in a county jail. It was one of those jobs where you learn quickly what's real and what feels real at 3 a.m. behind concrete and steel. Most of the weird stuff you could explain away. Guys hallucinating from withdrawal, mumbling at shadows, screaming into corners like someone was there. We'd laugh it off. Call it jail madness. But there was one section of the jail that nobody ever laughed about. C block. Even the inmates avoided talking about it. Some refused to be housed there, even if it meant a longer stay in solitary. I didn't get it at first. It was just an older part of the jail, left over from before renovations. Cramped cells, cold concrete, and lighting that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The place smelled like rust and mold and something faintly metallic that always lingered, no matter how much bleach we used. But the weirdest part was that C block was always cold. Not just chilly, but cold. Like breath fogging, finger-numbing cold. Even in the summer. No airflow, no vents, just this heavy, dense cold that wrapped around you the second you walked past the gate. One night, Sometime around 3:15 a.m., I got sent down to C block for a visual check. The cameras had been acting up all week, static, flickering, even going black completely. That night, they'd cut out entirely in that section. I remember sighing, grabbing my flashlight, and muttering, "Of course." The hallway was dead quiet. My boots echoed with every step. There was only one flickering bulb, lighting the way, buzzing like it was on life support. I started checking the cells, one by one. A few inmates were muttering to themselves, some were out cold. The rest were empty. Then I reached cell 9, and I froze, because there was someone standing there. Back to me. It was perfectly still, unmoving, tall and lanky, wearing what looked like one of our old-style prison uniforms, the kind we phased out years ago. His arms were slack at his sides, his head tilted just slightly, like he was listening for something. I radioed in. "Control, I've got an unauthorized cell in cell 9. I didn't get any response. I stepped closer to the bars, gripping my flashlight tight. "Hey, turn around. You're not supposed to be here." No response still from him. I was about to reach for the keys when the light above me flickered violently, popping with a loud snap. I looked up instinctively, just for a second. Then, by the time I looked back down, he was gone. The cell was completely empty. I stared with my heart hammering. I checked the lock, still engaged. The logbook showed no one had been placed in cell 9 for weeks. I backed out fast, trying to keep calm, and headed straight to the security office. When I pulled up the feed from earlier, I found nothing. It was static the whole time. No figure, no movement. The next night, the inmates started complaining. Some of them said they heard whistling in the dark. One guy said, someone whispered, "Get out," right into his ear while he was trying to sleep. Another inmate refused to enter his cell, pale as a ghost himself, swearing someone had stood at the foot of his bed and stared at him all night. It always came back to cell 9. We started doubling up on our patrols after that. Nobody wanted to go down to C block alone anymore. Then, about a week later, something really messed me up. I was sitting at the central desk, half watching the monitors, when my radio crackled to life. No call sign. Just this low, drawn-out whisper. "I am still here." I froze. "Control. Repeat that?" I asked. But all I heard was total silence. I rewound the tape. Nothing. Dead air. But I know what I heard. I couldn't shake it, so I dug into the old incident reports, pulled out an ancient logbook buried in a filing cabinet nobody touched. That's when I found it. Inmate name: Tony Halderman. Held in cell 9. Died in 1976. Suicide by hanging. He'd been awaiting trial for murder, swore he was innocent to the end. According to the notes, they buried him in his uniform, the same type I saw on that figure. After that, I put in for a transfer immediately. Thankfully, it got approved a few weeks later. I was gone before the end of the month. I actually don't like talking about it anymore, because people love to dismiss it as stress, exhaustion, or tricks of the light. But I saw him. I know I saw him, and I know what I saw. And some nights, when my house gets too quiet, when my old work radio kicks on for no reason, I still hear that whisper. I used to work third shift at a shipping warehouse just outside town. It was a massive place, cold, echoing with the hum of old machinery, and lit by rows of flickering fluorescent lights that cast more shadows than they banished. Night after night, it was just me and two other guys, Mitch and Darren, clocking in to unload trucks and scan inventory. We each had our zones. Mine was usually the far corner, aisle 19 through 24, where the older shelves stood like rusted skeletons. That night started like any other. Mitch went out for his smoke break. Darren was by the docks, signing off on a late truck. I was alone with my scanner, working my way through a pallet of mislabeled boxes. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. It was very low, steady and heavy on the concrete. I turned immediately, expecting to see Darren, but the aisle was completely empty. Just shelves and boxes, stacked high. I waited for a moment, trying to listen past the silence, but there was nothing. I figured maybe the sound echoed weird off the shelves, or maybe I was just tired. So I shrugged it off and went back to scanning. A few minutes passed, then I heard the footsteps again. But this time, it was faster, like someone pacing back and forth, just out of view. "Darren," I called out, but I heard nothing. Then all of a sudden, I felt it. The pressure in the air is subtle at first, but growing. Like the whole warehouse had taken a breath and was holding it. The temperature dropped not by a few degrees, but drastically. My breath fogged in front of my face, and goosebumps crawled up my arms. I turned to head back toward the break room. And that's when I heard a whisper. It whispered my name, right behind my ear. It was soft, raspy, like the breath of someone who hadn't spoken in years. I froze, and every instinct in my body screamed to run, but curiosity dragged my head around, and I saw it. A shadow. At the end of the aisle, just within the red glow of the emergency light, was a figure. It looked human but wrong. Its limbs were too long, and it stood too still, like it didn't need to breathe. There were no features, no face, just a dense, black outline, darker than the darkness around it. And worse, it wasn't cast by anything. It just was blank. And by the time I blinked, it was gone. Just suddenly my legs finally listened, and I bolted back through the aisles, almost knocking over a rolling cart, and slammed into the break room door. Mitch and Darren were already inside. Mitch looked pale, his cigarette shaking between his fingers. "You okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He just nodded slowly and muttered, "Man, I thought I saw someone walk past the security gate. He was tall. Thought it was you, but..." His voice faded out. We all sat in silence for the rest of the shift. None of us mentioned it again. 2 weeks later, Mitch turned in his badge without warning. Darren transferred to another location. And for me, I stayed, but I never went near aisle 19 alone again. And every night since then, I carry a little pouch of salt in my pocket. Because some shadows don't come from the light. They come for you. I've been a long-haul trucker for nearly 2 decades now, and when you've spent that much time out on the road, you get used to certain things. The long, lonely stretches of highway, the way the dark seems to breathe just beyond the headlights, the strange sounds that come and go without explanation. Then after a while, your mind stops flinching. You learn to shrug things off, tell yourself it's just the road playing tricks, but every now and then, it's not a trick. It's something else. Something that follows you. Something that never really wants to let go. This happened about 3 years ago, and it still haunts me. It was a cold, dead night in New Mexico. I was hauling a load along Route 285, one of those long, desolate stretches where even your radio gives up. No towns for miles, no gas stations, just a cracked road through desert blackness and an eerie sky that never quite felt empty. Around 2:30 a.m., I passed a crooked, half-rusted wildlife crossing sign. It was bent at a strange angle, like something had slammed into it or had even tried to rip it out of the ground. That's when I saw her. A woman, standing at the edge of the road. She was barefoot, pale as ash, dressed in what looked like a hospital gown. It looked dirty, torn, clinging to her thin frame. She didn't look up. She just stood there, staring at the yellow line in the middle of the road, with her head tilted unnaturally to the side. It reminded me of a broken marionette, like if you touched her, her limbs would just fall apart. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating due to too many hours behind the wheel, too much caffeine, and not enough sleep. But before I could even blink or fully register what I was seeing before me, she moved and took a step forward, right into the lane. Immediately, I slammed the horn so hard and swerved to the left just in time. My heart was pounding so loud, I could barely hear myself curse. I glanced in the side mirror, but there was nothing. No woman, no shadow. Not in the road, not on the shoulder. She was gone already. So I drove on, trying to shake it off. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a mirage. God knows the desert has its ghosts. A few miles down the road, I pulled into an old gravel pullout, just a wide patch of dirt and rock off the highway. No signs, no lights. Just me and the engine humming low beneath a sky full of stars. After a while, I killed the engine, rolled a smoke, and tried to calm down, telling myself again and again that it was nothing. But then, the knocking started. There were 3 slow, deliberate thuds on the passenger side door. Not frantic or panicked, just patient, like whoever or whatever was out there knew I wasn't going anywhere. I froze, my hand halfway to the lighter, breath caught in my throat, as the night around me suddenly felt much, much heavier. I leaned over and switched on the cabin light, but no one was there. Then came the second knock, from the other side. I jumped out of the cab so fast, I nearly rolled my ankle, spinning around with my flashlight sweeping across the lot. The desert swallowed everything. No footsteps, no animals, not even the wind. But when I climbed back in, the passenger seatbelt was buckled. It was tight, as if someone had taken the time to strap themselves in. I didn't scream nor ask questions. I just turned the key and floored it out of there like hell itself was licking at my tires. But as the wheels tore across the gravel, I felt it, like something had changed inside the cab. The air was wrong. It was heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. I turned up the vents, hoping to shake it off, but then the smell hit me. It was bleach, sharp and chemical, almost sterile, but beneath it was something coppery like blood, and underneath that, something foul and rotten, like spoiled meat left out in the sun for days. I gagged and rolled the windows down, desperate to clear my head, to believe it was all in my imagination. But finally, when I glanced up, I saw her again in the rearview mirror, sitting in the sleeper berth, grinning. Her head hung crooked, her eyes glassy and too wide, like she hadn't blinked in years. Her mouth opened too far, a slow, stretched thing, like it hurt to smile. I swerved so hard and nearly flipped the trailer, I slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and yanked open the back of the cab. But to my surprise, I found nothing. Just my blanket, a half-crushed water bottle, and the lingering heat of something that had been sitting there. I didn't sleep for the rest of the drive. I didn't even blink unless I had to. Every mile felt like a lifetime. Every reflective sign looked like her eyes staring back at me. And for the smell, it kept returning. But this time, it was stronger and more rancid. I started hearing faint scratching from the dashboard, like fingernails tapping just beneath the plastic. And once, just once, I saw her face again, in the side mirror, even though the seat next to me was empty. By the time I reached the truck stop near Santa Fe, I was already shaking. I parked crooked, practically sprinted inside. The cashier looked up at me, then quickly turned pale. "Sir, you all right?" she asked. I tried to laugh, told her I just needed coffee. She reached for the cup, then stopped. "Your hand," she whispered. I looked down. 3 long, thin scratches ran down my forearm. They were deep and red, still oozing a little, but I hadn't felt anything. The cashier stared at me strangely, waiting for an explanation. I gave a tight smile. Must have scraped it while unloading earlier, I mumbled, forcing my voice steady. She didn't look convinced, but she handed me the coffee without pressing. My hands were trembling, so I shoved one in my jacket pocket, clenched it into a fist just to keep it from shaking. I walked back to the truck like nothing was wrong, with my head down, calm on the outside, even though every part of me was screaming to run. That's when I saw it again, this time sitting on the dashboard, tucked just beneath the GPS like it had always been there. A piece of cloth, thin and white, speckled with blood, hospital gown fabric. I couldn't touch it, but just stared at it for a full minute with my heart hammering like it was trying to punch through my ribs. Then I rolled down the window and flung it out into the highway wind, like distance could erase whatever followed me. I sat there for a moment with my hands gripping the wheel and my eyes fixed on the empty space where it had been. The engine hummed beneath me, low and steady, like it was waiting. Finally, I started the engine slowly, like any sudden movement might wake something sleeping. I didn't stop again, and this time I took the long route home, stuck to daylight hours, and stayed on crowded roads, beneath wide, open skies. But it didn't matter, because ever since that night, I still see her. Sometimes it comes like a reflection, or like a pale shape behind me in a bathroom mirror at some random truck stop. Other times, she's clear in the rearview mirror, crouched low in the back seat like a waiting predator, vanishing when I turn to look. I dream of her too, dreams where I'm still driving, but the road never ends. It stretches into blackness forever, and I can hear her nails dragging across the inside of the cab, slow and deliberate. Sometimes I wake up with scratches on my neck. She doesn't speak, but her presence is a scream that never stops. And when she smiles, it's not a smile made for a human face because it's too wide, too hungry, like her mouth is remembering what it used to do before it forgot how to be a person. I've driven through storms, blizzards, even crash zones, but nothing has ever shaken me like this. It happened in Oregon. Late one night, a trucker named Rick was heading southbound on Highway 101. He'd driven that route for over a decade, knew every rest stop, every creepy bend, every odd stretch of forest that hugged the road like it was hiding something. This night was worse than usual. Fog thick as milk, pressing up against the windshield like it wanted to. The wipers clicked rhythmically, doing nothing to push back the unease crawling up Rick's spine. Around 2:13 a.m., he passed mile marker 199. That's when he saw them. 2 kids, just standing on the shoulder, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 or 9. They were barefoot and pale. The girl had long black hair and was wearing a white dress stained at the hem, like she had walked through something wet. The boy stood slightly behind her, motionless, his eyes empty like an unplugged doll. They didn't look hurt, just out of place, and also out of time. Rick slowed down automatically. You don't just leave 2 kids alone in the middle of nowhere, especially not at that hour. Something about them seemed off, too still, too quiet, but concern outweighed caution. He rolled his window halfway and called out, "You kids okay?" The girl stepped forward. She didn't walk, she stepped, gliding without bounce or hesitation. Her mouth opened, but the voice that followed didn't come from her. It came from behind Rick, a cold, low whisper just inches from his ear. "Don't stop!" Rick's blood turned to ice. He jerked around, but nothing was there. Just the empty cab of his truck. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He could feel eyes on him, feel breath that wasn't his own. When he turned back to the road, the kids were gone. No sound, no sign. Not even a footprint in the fog-slicked gravel. He didn't hesitate this time. He slammed his foot on the gas. His tires screeched, spitting stones as the truck roared forward. It felt like something was chasing him, something just outside his mirrors. He didn't stop again until a few miles down, at a diner still glowing under flickering neon. It was mostly empty, just a tired waitress wiping the counter and an old man nursing a coffee. Inside, Rick sat down, still shaking. He told the waitress what happened. Her expression shifted from polite to horrified. She leaned in, lowered her voice. "You stopped near mile 199? She asked. "You're lucky." Then she pulled out her phone and scrolled to an old article. The headline read, "Mother and 2 children killed in crash off Highway 101. She explained years ago a woman lost control of her car near that exact spot. The vehicle flipped, plunging into a ravine. No one survived. The boy and girl were thrown from the car, but since then, truckers, travelers, and night drivers, they all started reporting the same thing. 2 kids standing by the highway, always barefoot, always silent. Some even say if you stop and open your door, they climb in, and you never make it to your destination." It started with small little things. A glass falling off the table when no one touched it. Toys going missing only to reappear in strange places. Inside the freezer, under the bathroom sink, or floating in a bathtub filled with ice water. But the first time I really noticed something was wrong with my daughter, Ellie, was the night she stopped blinking. I don't mean she forgot to. I mean she sat there, cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide open for nearly 2 hours, just staring at the wall. Not a single flinch. Not even when I called her name or waved my hand in front of her face. Eventually, I touched her shoulder. That's when she blinked once and smiled with a wide, toothy, unnatural grin. That night, I decided to check on her while she slept. She wasn't in bed. I found her in the basement, sitting on the cement floor, talking to the dark, whispering. "Ellie?" I asked. She didn't respond. She just kept whispering. I couldn't hear what she was saying. But when I stepped closer, she turned. And the whispering didn't stop. Her mouth wasn't moving. But I could still hear it. The words were too fast, too garbled, and coming from somewhere just over her shoulder. After that night, things got worse. Lights flickered whenever she was upset. We'd find deep scratches in the walls. 3 long, jagged claw marks. Always in sets of 3. And she began to speak in a voice that was not hers, which was deeper and rougher. One day, I found her in the kitchen with all the forks and knives laid out in a perfect circle around her. She looked up at me and said, "It's coming for you next, Daddy." That was when I knew it wasn't just sleepwalking or trauma. It was something else. I took her to a psychiatrist, to someone reputable, someone who specialized in childhood disorders. Dr. Felton. At first, he thought it was dissociative identity disorder or trauma-based schizophrenia. He even suggested it might be attention-seeking behavior. But then, he had a session alone with her. It lasted for only 15 minutes. When he came out, his face was white. Not pale. White. Like someone had drained every drop of blood from him. He didn't say a word. Just handed me a card and said, "This isn't psychological. Call this priest. Don't wait." I asked what happened. Dr. Felton only said, "She knew things. Things about me, my thoughts, my childhood." She described a dream I had last night. Word for word. I didn't wait. I called the priest. He came. then performed the rites. Ellie screamed, but not like a child, like an animal, like something cornered and starving and furious. The lights shattered. The house shook. When it was over, she collapsed and slept for 2 days. And when she woke up, she asked me what happened, like she didn't remember a thing. She's better now, mostly. But every now and then, I catch her staring at the basement door and smiling. I was 7 when it happened. My family had just moved into a new house. It was cheap, old, and tucked deep into a wooded neighborhood that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in years. I didn't mind. I liked exploring, especially the attic. It was small and dusty, with one of those pull-down ladders. My parents told me not to go up there, but I did anyway. What 7-year-old wouldn't? That's where I found the mirror. It stood at the far end of the attic, wrapped in a dirty sheet. Something about it called to me. I remember pulling the cover off and just staring. It wasn't a normal mirror. It didn't show the attic behind me, but rather it showed a different room entirely. The walls were darker. The light flickered red, and there was a reflection of me. It didn't move when I did. I should have screamed, but I didn't. I remember smiling. I remember stepping forward. And I remember the reflection stepping forward too, but just a half second too late. That's when something crawled into me. The rest is a blur. I remember days passing like seconds, hours of missing time, moments where I'd wake up standing outside in the rain, or in my parents' room, staring at them while they slept. My parents say I stopped speaking for nearly 3 weeks. I drew things instead, violent, disturbing things, people without faces, hands reaching for mirrors, my family burning, my eyes bleeding. One night, my mom said she found me in front of the mirror again, talking to it and whispering. But she said the creepiest part wasn't what I said. It was what whispered back. A voice she swears sounded like me, but was older, colder, and full of hate. They smashed the mirror the next day, burned it, and buried what was left. And whatever had crawled into me, it left. But sometimes I still wake up, and the reflection in my bathroom mirror doesn't blink when I do. My first night at the hospital felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Most of the place was shut down. A skeleton crew ran the ER and a few recovery rooms, but the East Wing had been sealed off for years, supposedly for ongoing renovations. That was a lie. You could smell it. The wallpaper peeled like old scabs, and the lights buzzed with a dying hum. I was hired as night security, which meant I got a walkie, a rusty set of keys, and instructions to do hourly rounds and not bother the nurses. Out of boredom, I asked the head nurse, Janice, about the East Wing. She gave me a strange look, like someone who'd seen too much and said too little. Her voice was flat. Just don't go past the chapel after midnight. If you hear doors open, don't follow. If someone calls your name, just keep walking. I thought she was messing with me. But at 1:13 a.m., the East Wing called me. Not with a phone, not a person, but a sound. I was near the nurse's station when I heard metal wheels screeching faintly against tile, like a stretcher being pushed somewhere deep in the building. I checked the monitors. It was just static on the hallway cams. My curiosity won. I followed the sound down the corridor toward the old surgical suites. The air got cold. The East Wing was pitch black. My flashlight flickered like the darkness was pushing back. Then a voice came from the intercom overhead. Warped, wet, drowning in static. Room 11. Help. Please. But that wing had no power, no active lines. I'd seen the maintenance logs. I should have turned back. Instead, I went in. Room 11 was at the end of the hall, the door cracked open. The light above it blinked fast, almost in warning. Inside was freezing. No bed, no machines. Just cracked tile and 4 letters smeared on the far wall. S-T-A-Y. On the floor was a crumpled patient gown, the collar soaked in a dark, dried stain that smelled like blood. Then the intercom clicked on again. This time it was louder. "Don't go!" I jumped, spun around, but found nothing. The hallway behind me was empty. I backed out slowly and ran to the security office. I locked the door and turned on the monitors. It was all static, except one, room 11. The feed showed a figure standing in the corner. Its skin was grayish white under the night cam, almost see-through. Its head hung at a broken angle, and it stared right into the lens. My walkie crackled. "You saw me!" It wasn't a call. No one was on the other end. I didn't sleep, because every time I looked back at the monitor, the figure was a little closer. The next night, I came in thinking maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe sleep deprivation and a little paranoia had scrambled my head. Ghosts aren't real, right? But the air was heavy the moment I walked in. Janice wouldn't meet my eyes when she handed me the keys. She didn't even say hello. Just muttered, "You stayed. That's brave." That didn't sit right. I started my rounds, sticking strictly to the lit areas this time. The ER hallway, the break room, the chapel, then back again. But just after 2 a.m., my walkie buzzed to life, loud enough to make me jump. "Room 11 is open," it said. I didn't press the button. I didn't respond. Because the voice wasn't Janice's. It was mine. My exact voice. Same tone and same rhythm. I stood there frozen until I heard it again. Not from the walkie this time. It came from behind me. "Room 11 is open." I turned but found no one. I should have run. I know that. But something pulled me toward the east wing again. This time, not just the voice. The lights overhead flickered rhythmically, one by one, like breadcrumbs leading deeper into the dark. I passed the chapel. The door was slightly ajar, and from inside I heard breathing not the casual kind, but labored, raspy, and wet. I kept walking down the hall, past the nurses' station that hadn't been staffed in over 5 years, toward room 11. But when I reached it, the door was closed. Not just closed, but sealed. A heavy hospital gurney was jammed against it from the outside. Something didn't want whatever was inside getting out. And then, the floor beneath me squelched. I looked down, then I saw blood. It oozed from the seams in the tiles, thick and black like oil. The entire hallway was slowly flooding with it. My shoes slipped as I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. The blood wasn't just spreading, it was moving, snaking toward me. That's when the whispering began. Voices, dozens of them. Some were crying, others laughing, and one repeated the same phrase over and over in a child's voice. "He opened the door. He opened the door. He opened the door." The gurney screeched suddenly, shoved aside by invisible hands. Room 11 opened. Inside was me. No, not like before. Not a copy. It was me. Sitting in a wheelchair, pale as chalk, tube shoved into my arms, my mouth stitched shut with black thread, eyes wide open, staring directly at me. I turned to run, but slipped in the blood and slammed shoulder first into the wall. The whispering stopped. There was a dead silence. Then, now there's two. The voice came from inside my head this time, like a thought I didn't think. I don't remember running back to the security room, but I did. When I got there, Janice was waiting. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. "I told you not to go past the chapel," she whispered. "They don't like being seen." Before I could ask what she meant, every monitor in the office turned on at once. 12 different angles, 12 different rooms. Each one showed a version of me. Sitting, standing, crying, bleeding, screaming. "They remember you," Janice said. "And now, you'll never leave." I didn't show up for my next shift, but apparently I did, because Janice swore. She saw me walk in. Same cloth, same tired shuffle, same badge. She even said I smiled at her. But I hadn't left my apartment that night. At first, I thought it was a schedule glitch, maybe a prank. Then I saw the security footage. There I was, walking in at exactly 11:58 p.m., swiping in with keys in hand and blank expression. As I fast-forwarded through the footage, my stomach dropped. My double walked the halls like I normally did, but his movements were off. It was stiff and robotic, like something was wearing me and hadn't quite figured out how. At 3:17 a.m., he stopped outside room 11, slowly turned to the camera, and smiled. But it wasn't my smile. It was too wide, too perfect, like it had been carved on. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. I tried to brush it off. Stress, maybe, sleep deprivation, or a hacker messing with my footage. Then the reflections started acting strange. In the mirror, my reflection blinked out of sync. In a train window, I saw myself grinning while my real face stayed still. On my TV screen, I passed behind the couch, but the reflection didn't move. That version of me was watching, and it hated me. Then came the dreams. I would wake up in a hospital bed, completely frozen, with the walls peeling and the lights flickering. And across the room, I'd see myself again, stitched like a corpse, grinning, and slowly getting closer. Sometimes I'd wake up sweating. Other times I'd wake up at the front door, hand on the knob. Then came the footprints. Bare, wet, leading into my locked apartment. That's when I stopped sleeping. I smashed mirrors, covered screens, burned sage, moved, prayed. Nothing helped. Even in a pot lid, I saw it grin again. Then came the note, slipped under my locked bedroom door. No envelope, just my handwriting. "Your shift starts at midnight. Don't be late." Taped to it, my hospital ID. Only the photo wasn't mine. It was his, the one from the footage. I burned the badge. I moved again. But every night at 11:58, I feel it. The same cold draft. The hospital scent, antiseptic, and blood. And just outside my door, 3 soft knocks. They never stop. Not until 3:17 a.m., the exact time he smiled. The night shift at a gas station isn't what people think. Most imagine it's quiet, just a guy behind the counter waiting for morning. A simple job, easy money. But when you're the only one awake for miles, the silence isn't comforting. It's suffocating. At first, you don't notice it. You hum along to the faint crackle of the radio. Tap your fingers against the counter, try to keep your mind occupied. But as the hours drag on, something shifts. The buzzing overhead lights seem louder, their flickering almost rhythmic, like a pulse. The coolers hum with an unnatural drone, filling the emptiness with a sound that burrows into your ears. and the security monitors, static-ridden from the storm, glitch just enough to make you question if you really saw movement or if your tired brain is playing tricks on you. At 3 a.m., that dead zone where time slows and reality warps, I sat behind the counter, rubbing sleep from my eyes. The rain smeared against the glass in heavy sheets, making the world outside look blurred, distorted. The roads were empty. No headlights, no late-night travelers stopping in for coffee. Just the endless downpour and the occasional rattle of wind against the station's flimsy exterior. The cameras flickered again, distorting the empty lot in grainy black and white. The gas pump stood alone in the storm, illuminated by the weak glow of the floodlights overhead. The whole world felt abandoned. And then I saw him. A figure, barely visible through the rain, standing just beyond the reach of the station's lights. Not moving, not seeking shelter, just standing there, watching. He wasn't pumping gas, wasn't heading inside, just stood there. The rain poured down in relentless sheets, hammering against the pavement, forming shallow pools that rippled with every heavy drop. The wind howled through the empty lot, rattling the metal sign above the station, making the glass windows shudder in their frames. Yet, through it all, he remained still. The rain soaked through his clothes, darkening the fabric until it clung to his frame. Water dripped from his hair, running in thin rivulets down his face. But he never reacted, never shivered, never flinched. But something about him felt wrong. I squinted through the window, trying to make out his face. But the storm distorted everything. The slashing rain, the flickering streetlights, the warped reflection in the glass. The security monitor crackled with static, the black and white image shifting and breaking apart. I tapped the screen, trying to clear the interference, but the picture barely improved. Just a dark figure, standing motionless, watching. A prickle ran down my spine. My breath hitched, an unease settling deep in my gut. I glanced back up, and my stomach dropped. He was closer. He didn't walk or run, but was closer. A second ago, he had been standing near pump number 4, a good 15 feet from the building. Now, he was at the edge of the overhang, just beyond the glow of the station lights. I hadn't looked away for more than a second. There was no way he moved that fast. No way. The automatic doors remained shut, locked for the night. The wind howled through the empty lot, rattling the metal trash cans near the entrance. My fingers hovered over the phone beneath the counter. Something wasn't right. And somehow, I knew. He was only going to get closer. Our automatic doors locked at midnight. They weren't supposed to open again until morning. Yet I heard it. The chime echoed through the empty store, sharp and unnatural against the hum of the flickering fluorescent lights. My pulse lurched. I spun around so fast my chair nearly tipped over, my breath catching in my throat. The door was open. A gust of cold air crept in, carrying the sharp scent of rain and asphalt. The wind howled outside, rattling the glass panes, but the door itself hadn't moved, not that I had seen. And yet, standing just beyond the threshold, dripping water onto the tile floor, was the man, inside. His soaked clothes clung to his frame, water pooling at his feet. His face remained shadowed, just beyond the glow of the overhead lights. I hadn't heard him step forward, hadn't seen the door slide open. And yet, there he was, watching me. I never saw the door move. Water pooled beneath him, dripping from his soaked clothes, spreading across the tile in slow, widening circles. But his shoes, they left no footprints. My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't possible. The floor was slick with rain, yet there were no traces of where he had stepped. No wet tracks leading from the door. The longer I stared, the less human he looked. His skin, pale and waxy under the fluorescent lights, seemed almost translucent, as if stretched too thin over the bones beneath. Shadows clung unnaturally to the contours of his face, making it hard to tell where his features began and ended. And his hands, fingers too long, joints bending at angles that made my stomach twist, like they'd been broken and healed the wrong way. I gripped the counter, nails pressing into the laminate. My throat was dry. "Sir, do you need help?" For a second, he didn't move, didn't blink. Then, slowly, so slowly, it stretched across his face. A grin, not a polite smile, not an embarrassed, sorry for scaring you kind of grin. Something else, something hungry. "You left the door open for me." His voice was low, smooth, almost amused. A chill slithered down my spine. I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. And yet, he was here. Outside, the storm raged, a relentless force battering against the world. Thunder cracked like a whip, shaking the windows in their frames. The wind howled through the cracks, rattling the glass. Sheets of rain slammed against the pavement, pooling in the empty parking lot. Inside, silence. The radio cut off mid-song, the melody vanishing as if swallowed by the air. The hum of the coolers stuttered, then stopped completely. Even the fluorescent lights, which always buzzed faintly, were eerily silent. The only sound left was his breathing. Slow and shallow, which was wrong. It wasn't normal breathing. It wasn't the tired, steady inhale of someone catching their breath. It was deliberate, ragged, as if he was savoring every second of the silence. I could feel it against my skin, this strange, suffocating presence pressing into me. It was like icy fingers dragging down my spine, wrapping around my ribs, squeezing. Then, he took a step forward. I stepped back. He mirrored me. Perfectly. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs, so loud I was sure he could hear it. My hand inched toward the phone, fingers trembling as they wrapped around the receiver. And then, the lights went out. I don't remember running or even locking myself in the storage room. All I remember is the silence. Then, suddenly, there was knocking. It was slow, rhythmic, and deliberate, but it wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside the storage room wall. A chill ran down my spine as I pressed myself against the far side of the room, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The knocking stopped, leaving behind an eerie stillness that made my skin crawl. Then, I heard his voice. "You left the door open." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a threat. It was a statement. A fact. My body froze. I clenched my jaw and shut my eyes tight, covering my ears as if that could block him out. I stayed like that, shaking, afraid to move. And when I finally opened my eyes again, it was morning. The store was empty. The lights were back on. The radio played softly. The coolers hummed like normal. Everything was fine. Except, the doors were still locked. The manager found me an hour later, curled up in the storage room. He chuckled, said, "I must have fallen asleep." Imagined it, but on the wet tile floor, right by the register. There was a single bare footprint. It was an old hospital, tucked away on the forgotten edge of town. A massive, crumbling building that felt more like a relic than a place of healing. The bricks were cracked and weathered by time, the windows fogged with permanent grime, and every hallway seemed to lean under the weight of years it could no longer carry. It had been patched up 100 times, new walls, ceilings, and coats of paint, but the rot was too deep to fix. No matter how many times they tried to hide it, the place still looked like it was barely holding on by a thread, or maybe something darker was holding it together. I was hired to do security, which was a simple job for me. All I had to do was patrol the halls, check the cameras, and ensure no one wandered into restricted areas. Easy money, I thought. Quiet nights, no problem, no disturbance, and for the first few weeks, that's exactly what it was. It was mind-numbingly boring. I spent my shifts pacing endless sterile corridors lit by flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed and hissed overhead, like angry insects. The hospital always smelled the same. It smelled like strong bleach that hurt your nose, old metal pipes, and something sour you couldn't name. The only sounds were the beeping of heart machines far away, the creaking of the old building, and sometimes a patient coughing in the night. It almost lulled me into a false sense of security. But then, things started happening. Things I've never experienced before. One night, around 3 a.m., a time people say ghosts can easily cross into our world, I was doing my usual rounds on the 4th floor. The 4th floor was supposed to be quiet, mostly filled with long-term care patients. The kind who barely spoke, they barely moved, and barely seemed aware of the world around them, their lives suspended somewhere between waking and whatever came next. While the other rooms sat abandoned in heavy darkness, their doors cracked open just enough to reveal a sliver of blackness beyond, like yawning mouths, waiting patiently to swallow anyone foolish enough to wander too close. As I passed room 417, I heard it. A laughter. It was soft, childlike, light, and airy. A bubbling giggle drifted from behind the closed door like smoke. I froze mid-step, a jolt of cold panic shooting through me. There were no children on that floor. There hadn't been for years, and visiting hours ended strictly at 8 p.m., so no exceptions. I stood there rooted in place, my heart hammering against my ribs as I strained to listen. The laughter continued, a teasing, playful sound, but it seemed to move, dancing from corner to corner inside the room, like something unseen was running wild. Finally, swallowing the knot of dread building in my throat, I forced myself to grab the handle and push the door open. But to my surprise, the room was empty. The bed was neatly made, corners tucked tight by the nightstaff. No patients, no visitors, no toys. Nothing but the faint, buzzing hum of fluorescent lights and the sickly glow of the hallway spilling across the floor. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, scanning every shadow, waiting for something, anything to move. But nothing did. I pulled the door shut quickly and moved on, forcing myself to believe it had been nothing more than the old building playing tricks on my exhausted mind. But a few nights later, it got worse. I was sitting in the security office, sipping lukewarm coffee and mindlessly watching the monitors when something caught my eye on camera 7, the West Wing hallway. A figure was just standing there. At first, I thought it might be a patient, someone confused, disoriented, and wandering out of their room, which wasn't uncommon in places like this, where the night stretched long and the line between dreams and reality often blurred. But when I leaned closer to the screen, the blood drained from my face. The figure wasn't moving, not an inch. It stood inches away from the wall, head bowed slightly forward, hands limp at its sides, as if it were whispering to the concrete itself. It didn't sway or breathe, which was wrong. A cold, crawling dread slithered up my spine. Without thinking, I grabbed my flashlight and bolted from the office, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud against the empty, tiled floors. When I reached the West Wing, the hallway was deserted, but the air was wrong. It was thick and oppressive, humming with a static charge, like the moments before a lightning strike. Each breath felt heavier than the last, as if the building itself was holding its breath. And there, on the wall exactly where the figure had been standing, was a smear. Dark, greasy. Something in between an oily handprint and a stain left by something not quite human. Against every better instinct, I reached out and touched it. It was ice cold. Not just cold from the night air, but unnaturally cold. The kind of cold that sinks into your bones and lingers. The kind of cold that makes you feel like you're touching something from the other side. I didn't know what was worse. The fact that something had been there, or the fact that it had wanted me to find it. After that night, everything changed. The hospital didn't feel old anymore. It felt alive. The lights flickered constantly now, buzzing angrily like swarms of invisible insects whenever I walked beneath them. Sometimes they would dim just as I approached, plunging the hallway into a flickering half-darkness that made every shadow seem to twist and crawl across the walls. It felt deliberate, as if something unseen was reacting to my presence. The elevators were worse. They groaned loudly in the dead silence of the night, their rusty cables creaking as the doors slid open on their own, revealing nothing but darkness inside. And sometimes they would open and stay that way, the empty elevator yawning like a waiting mouth, as if it's inviting me to step inside. Sometimes, as I made my rounds through the deserted corridors, I would hear my name drift through the intercom system. Soft, sickly sweet, and utterly wrong. A voice that didn't belong to anyone I knew. A voice that sounded far too close. Even though the speaker system was supposed to be completely shut down after hours. Every time I heard it, a cold weight would settle in my chest, which felt a little closer than before. I tried to brush it off. Tried to tell myself it was nothing but stress. Or maybe even the guilt of working in a place most people never leave alive. But then the patients started talking too. Whispers filled the hallways. Some spoke of a man in the walls, a tall, twisted figure who watched from the cracks, while others spoke of a woman with black eyes, who appeared at the foot of their beds, watching them with hollow, endless hunger. I wanted to believe it was just medication-induced hallucinations. I needed to believe that. Until one night, as I passed a patient's room, an old woman grabbed my arm with a desperation so fierce it stunned me. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, filled with pure terror, locked onto mine. "Don't let them in," she rasped. "Once you see them, they see you too." I forced a nervous laugh, tried to brush off the icy shiver crawling down my spine, and wanted to pretend it was just fear, nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. Later that night, as I reviewed the security tapes, I saw something that stole the breath from my lungs. On the monitor at the far end of one of the dark, flickering hallways stood a tall, thin, and motionless figure. Its silhouette is barely visible in the broken, stuttering light. I stared, frozen, watching frame by frame as the figure remained still, until slowly, unnervingly, it turned its head. Not toward the hallway or camera, but directly toward me, as if it knew I was watching, as if it could see me.